Oh, hey guys. Welcome to this week's episode of Ask Mish. So, I said to you guys, I was like, on my DMs, I want you guys to give me all of your problems, questions, concerns. Like, I want the Dear Abby style things. What predicaments are you in? What are you struggling with? I want to hear it. And you guys did not disappoint. You guys sent me a lot of stuff ranging literally from everything. So, I wanted to test my range out today. We're going to be dealing with two questions that you guys sent me, two completely different topics, and we're going to dive in. The first one has to do with some of the more traditional stuff that I work with. It has to do with this woman who is on her health and wellness journey, and she feels like her family's sort of like sabotaging her and like how to navigate that, which I have a lot of good advice for. The second one, as a stark contrast, like I said, you guys are testing my range here, deals with this girl who asked her boyfriend to borrow his phone, looked at his phone, opened up a web browser and found porn and felt like some type of way about it. And she asked me kind of like what I thought she should do given how she felt. So I covered all of that and I'm super excited to hear your feedback. If you guys have questions, please go to Instagram, DM me at Mish of Nutrish Mish. I'll put the link in my show notes because I want to hear your drama, your problems, your situationships, and help you address them. All right, let's dive into the family one first. All right, let's warm up before we get into the juicy stuff, right? So I'm going to read this one. So this woman said, "Dear Mish, I've recently started a health and wellness journey and I'm feeling super committed and motivated this time. The problem is my family. My husband, who does not have a weight problem, mind you, keeps bringing stuff into the house, and when I ask him not to, he tells me I should just have more willpower." You guys can't tell because this is audio, but I am eye rolling the F out of my screen right now. You know how I feel about that. We're going to get into that. How can I stay healthy when my family is literally making it impossible? So let's address the first part of what you said, that you're starting this health and wellness journey. You're super committed to it. I love that. Here's kind of a little bit of a mindset shift that I want you to have, that we're going to deal with the husband thinks. I don't necessarily love the way he's managing this with you. I understand why. And I'm going to give you kind of like the tools and tactics to deal with that. But here's a little mindset shift that I want you to have first. So when we look at weight at Nutrish Mish, we look at weight as like a symptom or like a reflection maybe of somebody's eating habits. So as their eating habits get better, as their relationship with food gets better, the scale is a reflection of that. We're not necessarily trying to like just chase a number on the scale. We're looking at that number as guidance. It sounds like for you, if you're in a situation where having that stuff in the house right now is difficult, and one of the underlying things, and this would probably be a primary goal for you, even more so than weight loss directly, you can have stuff in the house and like you don't care, right? So, because if you could have stuff in the house and not care, wouldn't that in turn probably get your weight to a place you wanted to be? And because it's actually solving for a problem, it would actually like make your weight be permanent, right? You'd actually like lose the weight and keep it off rather than maybe like just sort of like white knuckling it or relying on something like willpower, which isn't real, and then inevitably you gain it back. Eventually the goal would be that it's in the house and it doesn't bother you. You could take it or leave it. But in order to get to that place, it's hard when it's there all the time. It's not impossible. It just makes it a lot harder. So if we can start to create a little bit of friction between you and the food, meaning it's not like right there, it's not as easily accessible, that would be ideal. So the first barrier to that sounds like it's your husband. And here's the problem is that if your husband doesn't have a difficult relationship with food, it is very, very difficult for someone who doesn't have a difficult relationship with food to understand the mindset and struggles and inner workings of somebody who does. My parents actually had this dynamic growing up. It was literally, besides like me being an annoying teenager, it was literally like the only thing that they fought over. So my dad had a very difficult relationship with food. He's actually the inspiration for this entire program, believe it or not. So he had a really difficult relationship with food, and my mom never really did, and she didn't really understand why my dad did, because food just like didn't do it for her. So the big argument that my parents would always get in growing up, believe it or not, was my mom always had this like canister of M&Ms out for decor, for decoration. I don't friggin' know. Nobody knows why. And my dad would ask her like, "Hey, can you like put them away? Can you like not have them out? Because like every time I see them, like I'm looking for them, I'm going to grab them." And my mom would just be like, "Well, you should just have more willpower, Howie." Like that's literally what she would say. And for somebody that struggles with food, that is like the most infuriating answer. It feels like invalidating. It feels like there's something wrong with you. Like it's literally the most infuriating answer. But you have to understand that that person just doesn't know what you're going through. So here's a good way to start to maybe have that conversation. Be like, "Hey, look, I don't expect you to understand why, but I'm trying to like have this health and wellness journey, and it is a little bit difficult to have this stuff in the house. I'm trying to get to the point where I can, but right now it's a little bit challenging for me. So I don't necessarily need you to understand why, but it would be really helpful and it would be super supportive if we could maybe talk about like having less stuff in the house, or maybe like having not my favorite stuff in the house, or like, do you really feel like you need the stuff in the house 24/7? Is there a compromise? So for example, I had this come up with a family recently that we work with at Nutrish Mish, and their big thing was ice cream. So the husband, actually same thing, husband and wife, the husband always like had ice cream in the house. So the wife, had a conversation with him, and she was like, hey, how about this though? How about we like go out for Carvel on Wednesday? So that way the stuff's like not in the house all the time, but it's like a one and done situation. We go out for Carvel on Wednesday. It's something we can do as a family. We look forward to it. Everyone's expectations are managed, but that way it's not always in the house. And the husband was open to it. He said, fine. And that worked out. Cool. So maybe finding like a compromise like that. What I hate when people do is, and so many people do this, is they're like, can you like hide it from me? Like hiding it makes it worse. Part of the problem, part of the reasons why anybody who has a struggle with food has a struggle with food is some underlying feeling of restriction. At some point in your life, you were told you couldn't have it, and it had this allure, and now it's like on a pedestal. And anytime that it's like sort of like out of reach for you, like to hide it on you, like it's just, I don't know, to me it's just got this like so sort of like condescending vibe, and I feel like it doesn't work for people because like you still know it's there, versus like if it's just not in the house but you guys have like a standing date on like Wednesday, you go and get Carvel or something like that, it makes it a little bit easier. So sometimes when you explain to the person like, hey listen, I get that you're not going to understand it, but this is a way that you can support me, and then you sort of you present an alternative. Sometimes people are open to that. I can't say it works 100% of the time, but sometimes, a lot of times it does. Now, if that's not an option and the stuff has to stay in the house, here's what you should do. Plan out when you're going to let yourself have it. And here's how I want you to preface this to yourself. You are practicing, all right? So yeah, when you're practicing something, you might not be great at it at first, right? You are practicing starting to have control over this food. You will find it easier if you know when you're going to have it. I'm going to use an example that has nothing to do with food. Let's say, for example, I am in the mall and there's a bag that I really want. And I'm like, ooh, I really want that bag, but I don't have any money. If I don't know, and I'm kind of like, oh, now you can't have the bag. You tell me I can't have something. Now I really want it, right? So now I'm like stewing over the bag, and I'm like, you know what? Just put on my credit card, deal with it later. Now I'm in quote unquote debt, right? Versus like if I say to myself, okay, I get paid on Wednesday, I'm going to buy myself the bag on Wednesday. My brain knows what Wednesday is. So now, right now, when I'm like really seeking the bag, like I can sort of reconcile in my brain that I'm going to buy it Wednesday. On then Tuesday, I don't need to stress out about it because I know I'm going to have the bag on Wednesday. Like my brain knows when I'm going to have the thing. And this takes some time, this takes a little bit of practice, but a lot of times we just have this stuff in our house and we don't have a game plan for it, and we don't know when we're going to let ourselves have it. So it becomes like impulsive. And then every single time we have an opportunity, we take it, versus like if it has to stay in the house, saying to yourself, you know what, I'm going to let myself have the chips on Tuesday and Thursday. As long as it's like less than you would normally have it now, you're still going to see results. People think that like in order to lose weight, they have to like cut out all of that stuff. Like you don't. Just like take inventory of how often it's happening now, or how often you're going to have it, like if it remains in the house, and just do it a little bit less. So you could either do it less frequently, or you could like do it just as frequently, but take a smaller amount. Just like practice being okay with it. But when you know when it's coming up, it makes it a lot easier to have control. When you don't have a game plan for it and you feel like you can't have it and you feel like you're white knuckling it, like that's not a great strategy. So as far as the husband or significant other, whoever goes, number one, explain to them like how you're feeling. They're not going to necessarily understand, and tell them like that's okay, but just try to explain it to them. Offer a solution of like, can we have like less stuff in the house? Can we maybe like buy the stuff that like, maybe I don't like as much? Is it possible that we like then go out for ice cream where you get it when you want it? Whatever. See if there's some sort of compromise that can be created. If that is not an option, then take inventory of how much you're having that stuff right now, or how likely you are to have, how often you're likely to have that stuff, and sort of like plan out when you're going to let yourself have it. And I just want you to see if it feels easier to you knowing that you're going to have it on this day, if it's easier to pass up now. You're practicing the skill of being able to take it or leave it. And it does take practice. But once you have that skill and you're losing weight as a result of having that skill, now all of a sudden you have permanent weight loss. You're not just like yo-yoing with the same pounds. You're actually solving for the problem. Those are my thoughts on that. I hope that was helpful. All right. Now, guys, let's dive into question number 2, stark contrast. Take this left turn with me and let's dive into it. All right. So this next question here might seem out of pocket, but it's really not. This type of question is one of the reasons why I wanted to expand this podcast to like an Ask Mish format, ask about anything rather than just like specific like nutrition related questions, because I get questions like this all the time. Or I don't say questions, I get this coming up a lot. When I get people in my office, typically they're eating for a million different emotional reasons. And there are a lot of reasons that people can feel emotional. One is like stresses in relationships, right? So I've gotten very good at giving advice in these types of formats, because when I'm looking at emotional eating, I'm looking at it from two parts. First part I call like minimizing the trigger. So can we like reduce how triggered you're getting by this? And then if you are already triggered, how do we have other solutions to deal with the emotional eating aspect? But I've been answering questions like this for years. So this person actually started off by saying, hey, I know this isn't normally what you talk about, but believe it or not, it is. And that's why I wanted to kind of like broaden the whole format here. So here's her question. She said, Dear Mish, which I love the Dear Abby style format. Let's keep that coming. Dear Mish, I know this is normally not what people ask you about, but you said we can ask about anything, so here it goes. I recently asked my boyfriend of 5 years if I could borrow his phone. I opened up the web browser to search for something, and it immediately opened up to a porn site. I know a lot of guys watch porn. I just didn't think he did. It's really bothering me. Do I confront him about it? Okay. So I understand that if you open up your boyfriend's or husband's or whoever's phone and you're expecting to see like a baking recipe, I don't know, and then it opens up to like tits, that's jarring. I totally understand that. Now you said confronting him about it. I definitely think you guys should have a conversation about it, but I don't necessarily know if I love the word confront, because I hate to be I hate to be the one to tell everybody this, guys. Every guy watches porn. There is not a guy. I shouldn't generalize like that. 99 point something percent of guys watch porn. They all do. But I think the reason that women get upset about it and the actual reason is different. And you guys will hear me say this a lot. Intention is everything. When I'm looking at I don't look at what people do a lot. I look at why they did it. Because the what could be for a million reasons, but the why to me is the most important. That's actually one of my main philosophies in life. Why, not what. So all guys watch porn. Let's just kind of clear that up. But it's bothering you. So if anything is bothering you in a relationship, it could be like a real serious, obvious thing. It could be something that seems silly. It could be anything in between. If something is bothering you with your partner, with your significant other, you 1000% want to have a conversation with them about it. Because, and all relationships, but my primary experience has been in heterosexual relationships. Like, it's the guy's job to make you feel safe. So, and not just like physically safe, but like mentally, emotionally, spiritually safe in every aspect of the word. So if something has happened or if they have done something that makes you feel unsafe and puts your guard up, you 1000% should have a conversation with him about it. I don't necessarily think this should be a confrontation, but I 1000% think that this should be a conversation. So what I want to do is, I'm not going to tell you how you should feel. I'm just going to give you some pointers or some things that you might want to think about before you have this conversation, so that it can be as like productive as possible and you can walk away feeling really good about it, because that's ultimately the goal. So the first question I want you to ask yourself is why it bothers you. Again, with the why. What did it make you feel? Because there's a couple different reasons why it might have made you feel a certain way. I'm going to cover in detail what I see the most common reason is and what I think probably the most common reason is. But like, for example, let's go over like the lesser common ones. If you are just morally against it, right? Like if you're morally against him watching porn, that's a little bit of a bigger problem, to be honest with you, because that's a difference in values. And you guys will hear me talk about this a lot. Like, the number one relationship killer to me is a difference in values or a change in values. I'm not saying if you have a couple different values, it can't work. But if you guys have like serious value differences, then that's a problem. So if he is watching porn and you look at that as like something morally wrong, that could be a little bit of a deeper problem. Still absolutely a conversation to have, but like you should definitely talk about it. Second reason that maybe is a little bit less common is maybe what you saw, like specifically, like maybe the specific content that you saw him watching, was that like weird to you? Did that make you feel like uncomfortable? Is that something that you would never do? Is that something that you were like, oh, I had no idea you were into that? Is that what it was? And again, separate conversation if that's the case. And the third one that is possible, but maybe a little bit less common, is, were you upset because maybe you guys are not experiencing the same level of intimacy that you used to be, and you're like, well, we're not having sex, but you're obviously like masturbating. Like what's the deal? Like, you're jerking off, but you don't want me. That's a different story. So you want to be very clear as to like what the intention is. So those are kind of like three ones that could be the case. And if that's those are the case, you want to kind of be clear as to like, okay, well, I want to go into the conversation. If you're morally against it, then that's a conversation. If it's something where like you're fine with the idea of him watching porn, but it's because like you guys aren't having sex, like that's a different conversation. If it's because like the content was like a little jarring to you, maybe that's another conversation to have. So the most common reason I see women get upset when they find out that their significant others are watching porn is because they perceive the intention of them doing it as likely different than what it actually is. A lot of women will think that the intention has something to do with they're not good enough. So they're going to look at it like, well, I'm not hot enough, or like, you do think that they're hotter than me? Like, you need to look like another woman's body. Like, what, do I not do it for you anymore? Like, they look at it as a judgment on themselves, where you're doing this because you don't feel like they're good enough and you feel like they're less than. I don't want to speak for an entire gender because that's not fair. And I'm not part of the male gender. I do have a lot of male friends. I've had this discussion with a lot of people before. I might want to like revisit this episode like with a male host, because I think it would be great to get like a guy's opinion. But I'm gonna do the best I can as a lady here. Um, Here's the thing. Guys, first of all guys jerk off, right? Every single one of them. Like, it's a way of stress relief, right? Where women, like, we of course, like, women masturbate. I'd say like of my guy friends, 100% of them do. Of my female friends, 65% probably do, right? But for guys, it's like a way of letting off steam. It's a stress reliever. It's just like something that they do. Now, that being said, and this is an important distinction that I think all men and women should know. This took me a long time to figure out. Men are visual, women are mental. I'm going to say that again. Men are visual, women are mental. Here's what I mean by that. Ladies, have you ever read like a smut book, right? Or okay, what was the fuck? 50 Shades of Grey, right? That was like every woman in the world, every woman in the world when those books came out, they're like, ooh, this is interesting. That's porn for females. And like, what did it do? It like turned you on, right? Like, it got you in the mood, right? So, but it was fine for when we did that. I don't think there was any husband that was like, you put that book down. Like, are you cheating on me with Christian Grey? Like, and I'm not making light of how you're feeling. I'm just trying to like help you understand it from a different point of view, right? So women are mental. And guys, this is important for you to know. Guys, listen up to me right now. So many guys in the world think that they will turn a woman on the same way that they get turned on. That is not the case. This is my PSA of the day here. Okay. Ladies, if you're listening to this, like, pause this and like listen to the rest of this in the car when your guy's listening. Women are mental creatures, okay? We get turned on mentally. We are a lot more likely to get turned on watching like or I'm sorry, listening to, or like, reading like a smut book or something like that. Like, we have to get turned on in our minds. I'm much more likely to have some like sort of thing going on in my brain, right? Rather than like watching something. I'm not saying watching something like won't turn a girl on. Of course it will, but women are just more mental creatures. So that's an important part of foreplay, by the way. Everyone needs to know that. All right, PSA of the day. Guys, on the other hand, are more visual. So a guy might be watching porn, and that's going to do the same thing for him as like it might do for somebody reading like a smut book or 50 Shades of Grey or something like that. So hopefully that kind of like makes it feel a little bit like less kind of personal and a little bit more benign and a little bit more like general, right? I'll make a weird food analogy for you guys because that's just my background. So if I'm just like kind of like craving something sweet, right? I'm just like craving like something, like it doesn't matter what, like I'm just like craving something sweet. Like, that's a little bit different than if I'm like, I want this specific thing. Like, I want like New York style cheesecake right now. You know what I'm saying? And I think and if I have anything else, it's not going to do it for me. I think a lot of times, like, that's sort of like what porn is for guys. Like, it doesn't really matter. They're just like trying to get turned on so that they can jerk off and like get a stress relief, right? It doesn't really matter what it is so much, versus like, you're the New York cheesecake. Like, you're the one he really wants. Like, you're the specific thing that he wants. But if you're not available because he needs to just get this quick stress relief out, right? Which is not the same thing as like sex, right? Like, when he's having sex with you, hopefully it's like intimate and special and whatever. And if it's not, then again, that's another conversation to have. But he's not trying to replace you with porn if this is like the intention. And that's why the intention question is an important thing to have. It's just like, guys, I think a little bit more than women use, masturbating as a stress relief, and an easy way for them to like kind of get that process going and get turned on is to watch porn. But it's not like a specific thing. It's not like they're obsessed with a specific, it's it's just like, let's just get the job done and move on with our lives. Whereas we sort of look at that as like, well, he's trying to replace us, which is like a specific craving, right? No, you're the specific craving, you're what he wants. But if you're not available, right, then it's a suitable replacement to get a need met. Just another way of maybe looking at it. But again, the most important thing is that you feel good about it. So the first question you want to ask yourself is like, okay, like, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? Like, what is the thing that's actually bothering me about this? And then once you're clear on that, I want you to also be clear on, well, what's going to make you feel better? And then is that a realistic ask? If your ask is like that you want him to stop doing it altogether because, it's something that's morally something that you're against, that might not be a realistic ask. Is there a compromise there? And if not, then maybe that's, something deeper that you need to kind of figure out in your relationship. Is it something where you're like, okay, no, it is just making me feel less than, and maybe like having a conversation with him and understanding why he's doing it is going to make me feel a little bit better. I mean, if you want to, maybe watch it with him. Like, that's kind of fun to do too. But I think the more important thing is just really having that conversation, and with the intention of him making you feel safe and secure, because that is like the most important part in any relationship, is that your guy is making you feel safe. So hope I did a good job addressing that, guys. If you want your questions addressed in anything, confidence, body positivity, nutrition, weight loss, relationships, sex, whatever, I want you guys to go to my Instagram at Mish of Nutrish Mish. I'm going to link it in the show notes. That's MISHOFNUTRISHMISH. And I want you to shoot me a DM and be like, girl, this is my question, and I will address it on the podcast. I will see you guys next Thursday. Have an amazing week, and everyone go talk to your boyfriends about porn.